So if you play this out long enough, do you see a post-money world? Does money get obsolete?
So, yeah, I think it actually does. I haven't talked a lot about that because even if you said by 2140, right, when this is likely to all play out by that time, and then and what would Bitcoin look like? That can you imagine going from a world that looks like 8 billion people in service of 8 billion people without a control system trying to take you to war and everything else, and trying to make you believe that that person's your enemy so that you can continue in this zero-sum game. Imagine in a world where everybody's competing with each other to provide more value and everyone's winning from that. Imagine from there saying, I'm going to go back to that bullshit. Like we would have had such an upgrade in consciousness. It would be hard to imagine going back.
Welcome to Time Standard, a podcast where we explore the constant bending the world. This is a show about time becoming the fundamental measure of value, coordination, and progress. Tune in as we explore one of the most transformative changes humanity has ever gone through. I had the privilege of sitting down with Jeff Booth again to explore the direction we are heading. Jeff had me deep in thought, so I chose to come back at the end to reflect on our conversation. We began with the future of jobs, because I find this is top of mind for many people. This conversation was recorded December 7th, 2025, and the dialogue around this topic has only grown since. Many prominent voices have started to chime in. Outsourcing our work to technology is by no means a new idea, but for the first time, I find it requires little imagination to see that that is going to happen. At first, this can feel like a threat to our well-being, but I find great irony that when our jobs are threatened, we fight to embrace our jobs rather than embracing the freedom and optionality that it should bring. Why is that? Let's hold that thought and jump into my conversation with Jeff, and we can unpack it a little further at the end. Today, I get to sit down with Jeff Booth again. Jeff is a lifelong entrepreneur, best-selling author, an independent thinker, just to name a few things. Welcome back, and thanks for being here, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks for having me again.
And I know you're really great at meeting people where they are, but I suspect you have a mental model that's maybe 2 or 3, 4 or 5 steps ahead of many people. And today I was hoping to poke at that future with you a little bit and try to extend my thinking and meet you where you are rather than the other way around. And I thought a good place to start is actually with jobs. As boring as that may sound, it's top of mind for many people, employees, employers, students, parents. And I was thinking maybe we could approach it in the same way you approached inflation, where you questioned whether inflation is really necessary or not. And so my question to you is, do we need jobs? And just to prompt you a little bit, I've heard you say previously that jobs will go away at the same rate that value accrues to the Bitcoin network. And I think that's such an interesting insight.
Yeah, so and I always start this in the same spot because I'm trying to break people out of their paradigm. If somebody's stuck in a bubble, they believe the world from their bubble, and it's reinforcing exactly their beliefs from their bubble. And so you have to want to say the natural state of the free market is deflation. That pierces that bubble. It might not right away, but first you have to kind of go through why would that be true? And I think first time, most people, when I say natural state of free market is deflation, do exactly what you're doing. Their consciousness, they nod. Even if they don't know anything about Bitcoin, if they know nothing about the economy, know nothing about inside their consciousness, they know a truth. They can feel the truth. But they can't, but what does that mean, right? What does that truth mean? So we can go through the steps of how that works because it should be pretty simple, right? Every entrepreneur that creates anything new, all things are created out of our mind to create new value for society. And everything new has to compete against what was there before. And we only use the things that give us more value. So the output of that has to give us more value because everything else fails in the free market. And the output of that has to mean prices fall. And if you drove exponential progress into that, exponential technology or artificial intelligence or robotics, exponential, as that happened faster and faster, more ideas competed to provide more value, prices would fall faster. So from that reality, right, then you'd have to say, but we've never lived in that reality, Jeff. We've never lived in a game that looked like that. So in other words, when we have these versions of a free market, capitalism, for instance, it actually is not a free market. It starts as a more free market, but then it gets consolidated and it gets controlled. And then the winners vote in the politicians, and then it gets controlled, more and more regulation. Government gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it stops being a free market, because free market would have to let prices fall. And we can observationally look around the world and then say, have we ever lived in that? So the answer is no. So what does that mean? We don't have a reference point for what I'm talking about, which is not just what I'm talking about, an absolute truth. The natural state of the free market is deflation. Yet we don't have a reference point. So that sets up a conflict in our mind, right? And we have to resolve that conflict. Most people don't. They just say, that's too big a deal. That's too big an idea. I'm just going to go back to my safe area that I know that I've always lived in, where it's always inflation. And anyone curious, it sets up a cognitive dissonance and a conflict in their mind that they have to resolve. And through that, and then if you asked a different question, instead of introducing Bitcoin right away, if you introduced, what would a open, decentralized, secure protocol bounded by energy be pricing? If you couldn't change it, if it was stayed decentralized and secure, it would be pricing that free market, because it couldn't be changed. And money's always been changed. So if it couldn't be changed, you would have a pure free market, the first global free market. And from the global free market, you would experience exactly what I'm saying. As technology moved faster, prices would fall faster. Now, if you held Bitcoin, if you then inserted Bitcoin, and then you thought you were pricing it from the other system, then you would convert the first free market to a piece of paper, and you would still be pricing inside the other inflationary system. You would still be trapped in the other system, in the other paradigm. But that's why this is that's why it's such a big deal, because people don't have mental models of what this is. And that mental model is an objective reality tied to energy imposing a discipline on the world, whether the people care about it or don't. It is true. But the perceived reality, prices always go up. Trump's better than Biden. Biden's better than Trump. This person's better than their perceived reality to them is true.
Mm-hmm.
Try to tell somebody that everything they know is wrong doesn't go very well. They have to discover. They have to come to the conclusion themselves through the curiosity, and some people don't want to. Some people want to stay in their bubble because it feels safer there.
Is one way to think about it that there has never previously then been a way for all of that value to flow to people, and for the first time, all the value that you're seeing, as you lose your job, we have a means for that value to be.
So now we'll go deeper again. So what does that mean about, okay, if the natural state of the free market is deflation and we've never lived in it, we know this is true on a free market. Free markets are more productive because there's more ideas competing. They're also more competitive, right? Because you have to compete with everybody, and you can only get paid more if you provide more value to somebody else. The only possible way to win more. But everybody wins because the output of all that competition is prices keep falling and you get more and more value forever. And you're both a purchaser in it, services and products, and a participant in trying to create more value. So can you imagine You probably can't. But what it would look like with 8 billion people competing to provide value for 8 billion people, and the output of that was faster and faster innovation, faster and faster productivity, faster and faster, more and more value, solve problems faster. What that would look like for society versus the zero-sum game we live in, where very few people actually get to contribute the most important thing, their mind, to society. So in a zero-sum game, most people are pawns in a system trying to get enough money to be able to live in that system that's getting harder and harder for them. And they keep turning to more and more control to be able to do that, which removes their agency and more power from them continually. So you have a zero-sum game against an infinite game. And why these are so hard to believe. It's really hard to come to a conclusion, right? If you think about the ego death that has to come through to you, right? You personally, to come to a conclusion that you were, most of the things that you thought were wrong. And you were an actor inside a system that was just a manipulative system that extracted from you and everyone else. People don't want that.
Yeah, the interesting thing is we tend to say our job's threatened. We tend to fight to preserve our jobs, isn't it? Because we're afraid of, oh, we can't afford X, Y, and Z. But what we're then missing is that prices are all falling. And I guess maybe another example is recently someone very famous, well-known, came out and said, with robotics and AI, I'm afraid we're going to lose jobs. And what are all the people going to do without jobs and no income? And what's interesting is, Bucky faced the same question 100 years ago. And his answer to that was that under a true or honest accounting system, you wouldn't need as many savings to purchase a house or make a living or take care of yourself. That's kind of what you're saying, right?
Yeah. So
your savings will go a long way in this kind of environment.
Those prices would fall, and they'd keep falling forever and ever and ever. So let's use the house as an example.
Mm-hmm.
So let's use any asset as an example. The reason why people have to store their money in assets is because they can't store their money in money. So they find different things to be able to store their value in because they know that money can't be stored in. Like, that's kind of ludicrous, isn't it? Right. The thing that we trade with each other, the money, that is the ledger, is so broken that we have to find other things to be able to store our money in because we know it's so broken. And so what would a house do then in that case? Well, a house would store better than your money. So more people would race into houses. You'd take more leverage against houses, and that would keep on rising. And the house then wouldn't be a utility that you raise your family in. It wouldn't have a utility value to raise your family in. It would be a store of value against broken money, and it would separate itself from what it would have looked like in an honest money system, where prices would continue to fall, because not just the prices of the house would continue to fall. There's lots of land in the world, tons of land in the world. Wouldn't it just be that? And if we talk about decentralization of energy and everything else, you'll see you'll unlock tons more and opportunities. Wouldn't just be all of the materials within the house would also fall. Right? It continue to forever.
Yeah, and as an architect, what's interesting is oftentimes we try to solve the problem with our own toolbox, and in this case, it really is not an architectural problem, but it's almost
it's a money problem. They're all
money problem. Yeah,
they're all money problems. If you just simply ask, name a problem that you could try to solve by artificially manipulating more money, and you'll find every single problem is a direct cause of artificially manipulating more money, because it's artificially, it's stealing our time and energy. So this new system that's being imposed on the world is moving 8 billion people in service of 8 billion people. Right? And that is what's happening is this, if it stays decentralized and secure, that the future, we're already living in the future. People who are living and spending in Bitcoin and building in Bitcoin, you're already living in the future that is so positive. It's so crazy positive because you're seeing the glimpse of what it'll look like everywhere else. And then you look back at this chaos that's happening, and too many people are moving their energy into the chaos instead of staying in Bitcoin, spending. But if you're just spending in Bitcoin and staying in Bitcoin, you can forget the chaos. You can
So,
amplify the pace of change to the new system.
yeah. So when you think about then the future of work, do you imagine a world where work goes from maybe being a burden to a privilege, in that maybe the best people in the world at certain things will be competing over that kind of work? Kind of like maybe the Olympics or something work right now?
Yeah. So even the question from, if we go out for far enough,
Hmm.
so will we always have problems? Likely. Will those problems always be opportunities to solve problems for people to create value? Yes. And will the output of those problems solve those? Like imagine a cascade, a swarm. Instead of 10 people trying to attack a monopoly, millions of people with all different ideas. And then once that creates more value, the new company or the new 10 companies create more value. And then a swarm of people attack those companies to try to create more value, and more value. The entire output of that is, as the jobs go away, so does the cost,
Right, right,
right? So does the cost. It just keeps on it keeps on falling. It's just in line with nature.
right.
And so you won't need a job. You would get richer and richer every year without a job, because you have the entire world working for you. Every single human is working for you on this trying to compete to make your life better.
Assuming Bitcoin is your unit of account,
Assuming
right?
Bitcoin is your unit of account, the entire world is working to try to make your life better.
So there's clearly going to be this pressure on what we call jobs today. And last time we met, we also talked about this new hurdle rate for businesses. And if you can't beat that business or hurdle rate, maybe you shouldn't even be in business. So that same pressure that's on jobs is likely also going to be on all the companies out there
Yeah, well,
to,
that's what's happening. Like they're failing in Bitcoin. If they're making
right.
10%, they're being repriced by Bitcoin. So if you're part of the network, and you're in Ethiopia and you think you're poor today, if you're just able to hold Bitcoin some tiny little bits over time, and you're able to hold more than you spend, you're repricing all of those companies that you think are rich today.
So at some point, all these companies and people realize this and slowly start to adjust their behavior, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, we're so early. We're so early in this. It's insanely early, because you'd have to ask yourself, how much time are you contributing to the new system? Even as most Bitcoiners, how much time are they spending inside the new system, building the new system, spending in the new system, versus participating, getting co-opted by the old system? And you'll find out most are still measuring in the fiat currency.
Hmm.
So we're insanely early. But that's also the opportunity, because what would it look like if you knew something that the world didn't know yet, and you could provide crazy untold value to them by helping them? We're creating a new part of the protocol. We're creating something that could help them understand it better. We're doing a podcast like you're doing. Like these, all of these people are going in and solving these problems because most, I mean, like, we should celebrate that we're so early. It tells you, it's screaming at you, the problems to be solved.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I want to jump to maybe build off of your comment about housing. And one question I have as an architect, I'm thinking about, the future of our environment, housing being one of those things. One thing I'm really curious about is where's the demand for physical assets going to go? And for a long time, the human condition we've always assumed is to want more and more and more. But with a non-physical place to store that wealth and energy, I'm wondering, do physical assets eventually start to become more of a burden? And I think you're seeing that in housing where people are getting rid of their second, third, or fourth home because it's a burden. And same with cars. And so as you kind of think about the future of a city and how that's going to change, I'm just wondering what this is going to do to the demand in physical assets and how
Yeah,
that
well,
might change the way we live and move around. And
yeah, just keep in mind that the only reason you need an asset is because your money's broken. If your money was
right,
broken, you don't need the asset. Now the question is, but they're all utilities. What would you like? So the utility value of something to you, which changes it from an asset. And so when money's not broken, everything changes. And that my recent speech in BTC and DC put up this graphic or this page, and I said the future is created by our mind. Right? So we know that there's always outliers that create. I thought the world was scarce. Somebody comes in and says something, whether it's an entrepreneur or a scientist says, no, it looks like it looks this way, and the world changes. All of the people, what's interesting. So inside our minds, we're trapped in these. What our past look like, what our ideas look like, what our mental model looks like, against a future that's unwritten. And what ends up happening is when something comes in that doesn't match our past, like Bitcoin or any entrepreneurs face of Galileo, right? Or any person who's challenged to a new reality, it hits that past and we don't want to change, right? Because our past, the paradox is those mental models, right? That we're looking through the future, we're looking through these past mental models, and we can't see how these new things destroy all of these models. They completely change. We can't see that, and the same thing is true. Use you as an example, right? If you said your parents, right, and all of the things they did, the challenges, greatness, all of the things, how do you go back another generation to the four people who created your parents? Go back another 8, right? Go back 16. You can see a cascade of ideas, and a lot of times inside the family unit, right? Most people think the same thing over and over and over again, and they'll play for. And so, what does that mean? Those ideas are so part of us. We so are so married to those ideas because they define who we are. And what we don't see is we also limit our future by those ideas just carrying forward. And any single person can come into your life. For you, Bucky, or maybe some of my work, it can come in and create a cascade in your mind. And it can be a 0 to 1 moment. And that 0 to 1 moment does this to your future. And you can see how infinite it is. But when you look around at your friends, when you look around at different people, you wonder, how can't they see it? But their reality is just as true to them as yours is to you. Right. And so those 0 to 1 moments don't happen very often. Not that they can't happen. They can happen anytime to anyone. What does that say? It says we're so wedded to our identity that's tied up into this mere reflection of who we are, that we don't want to see these new things because it pierces that bubble. And so when you look at everyone and so why would a change like this be so profound? Because it would be imposing a new reality, an objective truth tied to energy. But it would be imposing that against a whole bunch of minds that don't want to believe it. They want to stay inside their protective bubble that that they've grown up in and their parents grew up in, and to challenge some of their longest held beliefs feels like loss.
In some ways, it's probably a good thing, isn't it? This change isn't going to happen overnight, and it seems like it's going to happen one person at a time. But that kind of gives this change to happen in hopefully a maybe more smoother way than it happening all of a sudden.
I think that's probably the best thing you could say is the change can't be imposed on you. You have to want it. You have to want to discover it. Nobody can do it for you. You have to do the work to be able to realize, is this you have a choice of realities. You can stay in your reality that is going to feed back that mirror reflection of the world you believe in, and it will be right, and it'll get worse. And you'll think that there's a solve from it, that somebody else is creating the problem because you don't want to see it's you. Or you could face the fact that it's you and you could move your time. And so I think that path doesn't happen just all at once. People don't want to kind of lose everything what they owe and just change. It's a journey. That's probably why they say the rabbit hole's really deep, because that journey is you going through a reorientation of your mind.
Yeah. Do you think people or we all will be more mobile going forward if we're not tied to as many physical assets, jobs, that kind of thing? Do
All
you
of the
imagine a world where people are moving around a little bit more or a
all
lot more?
all all of these things. Community is better, right? So if you just started with if you couldn't solve a problem, like if every problem got worse from a system that manipulates money, then you'd argue that if the mirror image of that, the 180 of that in the system you couldn't, every problem would get better. When you think about when you said you talk about energy or cities, if you look at most cities today, they kind of around trade routes and bigger cities get bigger, then they decay, but they stay at a certain size. And feeding the energy or feeding the city is peak energy. You have to have energy on all the time. And to do that, you centralize energy. Same thing for feeding the city. You do track farming and you destroy pesticides and everything else to try to bring costs down to feed that city like that. And so you end up centralizing, you make bad energy choices. In centralizing of energy, you make bad farming choices, centralize farming, be able to feed how big these cities are. And you tell yourself, well, there's more people, there's more economic activity in the city because there's more minds competing with each other, kind of feeding off each other. And that's why there's more economic activity. Well, now when you have internet, we can do what we're doing right now anywhere in the world. You can have satellite communications and you can have over fiber. You can do this anywhere in the world. And you have Bitcoin chasing energy abundance everywhere. Now you can have tiny little pockets of villages or small regions that are completely connected to the mind share of the world, the best talent in the world. And you could be anywhere. And in that version, because you're building this from a base layer of energy in Bitcoin mining, you could run solar or nuclear, and you could power Bitcoin mining, who could do it, or hydro, or any other things anywhere in the world. You could have a small city that operates like a big city.
Mm-hmm.
And run local farming, you'd be just as competitive as anywhere else through that. So these things are really early, right? In that spread out, but they're available now. In Canada, I have a trap line and some cabins on that trap line that is completely off grid, but it's on grid. They've Starlink, I have solar, I have water. It's incredible. And it's exactly what I just described.
Remind me what a trap line is?
There's still a law in the books in Canada where if you're a trapper, you can buy the rights to this land, and nobody wants to be trappers anymore. So if you take the trappers course, you can find that. So some friends and I did that, and we own 2,500 square miles, 200 and something lakes, and
Oh,
we
interesting.
built some cabins, and it's a pretty remarkable spot just in the middle of nowhere.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I've started to think of, cities as more of a technology in many ways, and that potentially that technology might get disrupted or is getting disrupted.
Yeah.
And maybe we're maybe leaning towards maybe more of a decentralized living where it is just what you talked about.
Yeah, and some of this it ties into sovereign individual. Talked about this. How much power does a state have? Because as these countries or states or cities face a burden of taxes that cannot be paid and can't pay the debt, they're failing,
Mm,
right? And you don't want to, and the city doesn't feel safe anymore. So people want to move out to somewhere. They want to get back to nature. They want to get back to their friends, family. Like, what are they doing in this thing that's getting so far away? And people can feel it. They can't put their finger on why it's on what's happening. So the same thing that used to drive why you'd move to the city, because you could get a job in the city and you needed the job and you get higher pay in the city because, but all the expenses were higher there too. That thing is going to be unwound by this, by what we're talking about.
yeah, I often think about, the many different ways it's going to change our behavior, and one that I often think about is, I kind of want to poke at the future you see a little bit. Indirectly, maybe it's tied to how you think about spend and replace. But I often, and this is just an observation, but I often observe that many people are motivated by passing along generational wealth to their kids or grandkids. But you also see on this other side of the token, people receiving that kind of generational wealth and it kind of destroying their life. And I often wonder, is part of that because of the uncertainty in the future that we have? And would our behavior change if we were more confident that our children would be born into a world where their basic needs are met, for example? And I'm kind of curious what the future you
There's no one answer in that, because you kind of these big ideas to say it's just one variable, right?
Mhm.
And in a really complicated mix that is us and a whole bunch of variables. And tied to that, when we think about the future, we think typically what people do is they hold all the variables constant except for one,
Mhm.
and they can't see how they'll change. And that their own change changes all the variables.
Right.
And so I'm going to go to a higher level on this question because I think I have to do it. So, and I've talked about this a lot on different podcasts, but why do we do the things we do? We do primarily not for money, not for anything else. We do them for love and belonging. We want to matter primarily. It is our why. Love is everywhere. It's infinite, but we're so wanting to be loved. We're trying to find the thing that we matter to be loved. Right. And I use the example of the victim. Why they're the victim? Because they want people to come and say you matter. Right. When those people and they move away because it's tiresome, what do they do? What does the victim do? They typically double down and create more drama. So people come back. And you see that pattern. When I said, when you see anybody could change at any time, but you see their pattern and you see it repeat over and over and over again. Why does a family, why does somebody work over and over and over again tirelessly telling them that it's for the family, but they don't see their kids?
Right.
Because they want to be known for love and belonging, right? And so why do they want to leave a legacy for the kids? Same thing. Because they want to, their legacy, they want to be remembered after they die. It's a, it's all love and belonging. It's the same thing in all of us. And a lot of times we can't see the same thing. It's the same reason why if you look at a photo, you won't look at everyone else first. You look at you first. You're the center of your own movie, and everyone else is the center of their own movie, all doing the same thing. So when I watch this and everybody that is doing this same thing and knowing that I must be too, why am I doing the things I do? And if I really put, then it's all that. And that's okay if it's actually getting me there. But a lot of times people are so married to the thing, right? And you could see this in the same thing. You could use all different examples. Somebody fighting because the people around them, by them fighting, tell that person how great they are. And they don't want to leave the fight because it would feel like loss of the love and belonging. So I would say that just is. That's just us. And it just is. And that's how we show up all over the world. And all of these just different kind of fragments of us competing through that superordinate to the love and belonging. And love and belonging is, and love's everywhere, bathing in it. But we can't see it because we so want it. We so want to be seen that we're pushing it away.
Hmm.
So that's the bigger why. That's the bigger why to your question.
Yeah.
On how but what would happen now to take a totally different variable and say you don't have to do that. You don't have to matter more inside a system to be able to deliver value. You can do the thing that you're best at in the world and deliver value, and everybody wins. You can imagine the cascade of changes that start happening by that simple change. People can't see yet. They can't see how they're operating in this world. And a lot of their motivations try to matter they feel like they matter less and less. And then somebody says they're going to lose their job. They're scared to death of not mattering.
Hmm.
You see how it just grabs all of their attention and wants to just keep them there. And a different system would operate totally differently. They would matter. They already do. They don't have to be anyone else.
So if you play this out long enough, do you see a post-money world? Does money get obsolete?
So yeah, I think it actually does. I haven't talked a lot about that because even if you said by 2140, right, when this is likely to all play out by that time. And then and what would Bitcoin look like that? Can you imagine going from a world that looks like 8 billion people in service of 8 billion people without a control system trying to take you to war and everything else, and trying to make you believe that that person's your enemy so that you can continue in this zero-sum game. Imagine a world where everybody's competing with each other to provide more value and everyone's winning from that. Imagine from there saying, I'm going to go back to that bullshit. Like we would have had such an upgrade in consciousness that it would be hard to imagine going back.
Yeah. I think you can make the argument that you can't spend Bitcoin. You can maybe use Bitcoin. I don't know how you feel about that. I know you're sort of a proponent of spend and what do you call it, replace. But the way Bitcoin works, when you spend, quote unquote, spend it, you're creating value, you're exchanging, you're participating, and so in some ways you're using Bitcoin, but it's almost impossible to spend it.
That's the point where, and Roy wrote a really good piece on that piece, something Roy from Breeze.
Hmm.
But what would money look like? What should money look like? Right? Because all money is an abstract concept for the trade between us. The trade between us is that value transfer between us. So it's describing that value transfer perfectly.
Mm-hmm. So is there anything you're comfortable or willing to share? I try to think many steps ahead. You're already there. There's probably some things you keep to yourself for good reason. But is there anything that, with risk of sounding crazy, that you think about that hasn't quite hit mainstream consciousness yet? That
Just about everything I talk about. It's like, and I see some of the comments, and here's a comment I'll see from that people say, well, how can he be so positive?
mm,
And I know what they're doing is they're speaking from their reality, and they're not in my reality. They're not in now. It's not to say that I don't see all of what's coming as far as the attack vectors on Bitcoin and all. You can imagine what I see. I won't say, but I I see far more than most people would ever even understand. It's just I don't play into the conspiracy theories because, of course, they're there. Of course, a centralized system looks like that. Of course, it's going to get worse and worse. But all of the people talking about it from inside that system are actually giving their energy to that system.
Mm.
And I've stopped. And when I'm only giving my energy to the new system, I can understand it's all there, but I don't have to engage with it. Right. But when I, when you're, when you're building some of the tech, and I'm not building it myself, but when you're funding some of the protocol development that already can't be stopped, that adds privacy to Bitcoin, that adds scalability, that people can't see yet because they think it's a company or this, or it's just started, or it took a little longer. They can't see the things I see, but I see them every day, and I can see them spreading around the world in a way that keeps this decentralized and secure, that puts this and activates more people, because more people are going to get trapped in these things are coming out at exactly the right time to unlock them into something that they can't be. And so those
Mhm.
two will move their time and energy to this. But I guess if I'm being honest, from my previous view, I wouldn't have seen what I see now either. So what ends up happening is when you're around something all the time and inside it and committed to driving it forward, you see that abundance. You see all of that peel. It just comes to you. It's a mirror, and it comes to you. So I can fully understand that I would never seen that before.
Mhm.
So I'll give you an example on Fedi specifically. Right? Do you know anything about Fedi?
Yeah,
FEDI.
through your work, yeah.
So um, any any day now, you're going to be able to create a federation, and you're going to be able to go to 15 OG guardians who don't know each other, who will run one of the nodes for you. So you could set up a 4 or 5 node with 4 independent people that don't know each other. Fedi doesn't know who they are. I don't know who they are. But they've offered to provide essentially a backbone to something that you could set up your own bank, that you could protect all of your family on. Their communication, their money is now completely private, secure, and no, it can't be stopped because you can't find the individual people. It's
Mhm.
impossible.
Mhm.
So now you have a scalable solution that as the world's moving to stable coins and essentially a surveillance state, you have an ability to completely get out of it. And you can protect anybody you want by just allowing them to get out of it too. You don't have to take risk of being a money transmitter because no one would know you're a node. Right?
Yeah.
So these types of things needed to exist. But here's tied into that. Here's a different piece. If you didn't know this was here and scaling like it's about to scale, and you thought Bitcoin as a protocol at layer 1, it needs to do more. It needs to be private. I need to add more to it, which actually produces more risk. You could forgive people for trying to change the protocol because they don't know that something else solves it totally in a different way than they understand. And so being so tight into all of these things and seeing kind of this play out and what's going to play out, it makes me really positive on the future and able to tune out a whole bunch of the noise.
Mhm.
That's just part of the noise, part of what it would have to look like if we were the change.
Yeah, that's another really good example of something that used to require lots and lots of infrastructure, kind of just getting distilled into a protocol. And you talk a lot about enforcing this change on and discipline on everything. I go back to being an architect again, and I look around, and architecture is a resource intensive profession.
Yeah.
And I just can't help but see how much misallocation of resources there are once you kind of see this. Do you have a similar view on looking around now and seeing how everything's just gonna?
Yeah, well, this is a huge idea. It's the biggest idea that's ever hit us. Like, it really is. It's bigger than the internet. It's bigger than any idea that's ever hit us.
Mhm,
Because we've always lived in a zero sum game. Somebody had to lose for us to win.
mhm.
We would invade another nation, put them in slavery, and put us to it. So that would get more and more unstable as countries did that, and then that instability grew over time, and we would go to world conflict to reset the table, and then do it again and again and again, over and over and over again. Always been trapped in the zero sum game, believing it was somebody else. And now we have agency to live in an infinite game. Only choice is, when do you want to move your agency? How much of your agency do you want to move to the infinite game? And nobody can stop you.
Just out of curiosity, how far out do you feel like comfortable thinking about? You've talked about all these converging actions, and at some point, it's utterly unpredictable. Just when you think forward, how far out are you comfortable sort of thinking about things? Is it a decade, 2 decades?
Yeah, um, obviously the how it looks for the further out, you'd have to say, you can't, even in close. I can't tell you what's going to happen tomorrow. There's too many
Yeah.
tail events. All I can tell you is the trend. And I can tell you the trend on both different systems, and I can tell you the likely tail events, and I can tell you when they're going to come. But there's probably a higher probability that before we get all the way to Bitcoin, that a lot of people go into Tether, stable coins, think that they've resolved the crisis, that it centralizes faster from an inflationary system, that breaks down again. But we go through these, and then that fights Bitcoin. And then and tons of people get wrecked on that. Tons of people get wrecked leveraging their Bitcoin. Like, this is going to happen. So there's so many different ways people are going to get wrecked in trying to attack Bitcoin. And but the systems are incompatible together. Like, it's impossible to have a free market system and an inflationary system.
Mhm.
So inside that statement, it should move people, because if they're saying, I don't care, I'm going to measure in the inflationary system, they're really saying, I'm not a Bitcoiner. Right? I'm selling for a piece of paper. I'm in the surveillance state. And if they start to understand that in themselves and start to have agency and move their time, they're literally unstoppable.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a really important point. And maybe on that note, I think the reason I keep pushing on this and trying to anticipate the future, I think just looking at this as an architect, I'm used to thinking ahead because of the work we do
That's
um,
interesting.
takes 4 or 5 years to complete, but then, we're anticipating these buildings to last 50, 100 years. And so maybe that's where this comes from a little bit, is trying to kind of anticipate the future, knowing you only have so much control over that. And so maybe that's why I'm curious in your perspective, knowing you're thinking several steps ahead of my day to day.
Well, so here's a better way. Each day, do the things that, like, make sure you live every day, live every moment, every single moment. Don't do something in Bitcoin for one day. I'm going to hold Bitcoin forever, and I'm not going to live my life. If you're doing the things that resonate with you inside this, we talk about in Bitcoin, kind of the time zooms out, where you get your time back and everything else. And so it's easy to think longer term and everything else. What I'm going to do, I'm not going to spend as much and everything else. And that's part of it. You should always probably save more than you spend. Right? Should have been that way. The other way should be that way, or contribute more to society, which is a way to gain more value by contributing more to society. Make sure you're living your life. Make sure you're living every moment the way you want to live it, with the people you want to live it with. Yeah, and don't fall into a trap. I'm doing it for one day for
Mhm.
somebody else. And so, yeah, that's probably something. And if you need to spend some dollars to be able to do that, or whatever it looks at, in this current situation, be able to live your life, live
Yeah.
your best.
Yeah, that's a really great note to end on. Maybe I think just denominating your time in Bitcoin is really interesting and opens you up to a new way of valuing your time is a good way to put it. So I appreciate you carving out some time. I do want to, is there any, I do want to send people who are new to your work to a couple different places. The Greatest Game, I think, is a masterpiece. The Sailor series gets a lot of good attention, but I think the Booth series is just as fascinating and interesting. And of course, the book, the Price of Tomorrow, are all really great resources to dig a little bit further into some of the thinking behind Jeff Booth. Is there anything that you'd like to share on our way out?
No, but I just I mentioned it before, a keynote at BTC in DC, and that's probably worth watching if people haven't completely got this yet. If they're new to Bitcoin, it's probably worth kind of seeing yourself in it to start down that path. But it's thanks for doing what you're doing. Thanks for kind of bringing this to more people. I think it's important.
Yeah, of course. I'm learning a lot along the way, so I appreciate it, Jeff. Thanks. See
You
you
bet.
soon.
Okay, time for a little recap. If you are familiar with Jeff's work, you will notice that he is insistent on piercing that bubble before he gets going. We are undergoing a systemic change, and to really understand this change, it is important to suspend the many preconceived ideas we have about the way our world works. Think about the future of jobs. Jeff points out that when we think about the future, we tend to change one variable while keeping everything else constant. It is because we map job loss to our current reality that raises questions like, without a job, how will I afford a house? How will I feed my kids? What will I do without any income? These are all fair questions under the existing system, but they assume all other variables remain constant. What if we were asking the wrong questions? What if jobs themselves were not meant to last forever? What if the future of wealth distribution from productivity gains comes in the form of prices, not paychecks? What if jobs are just another form of technology that becomes obsolete once we have a superior system? We're not facing a crisis of work, we're facing a crisis of imagination. In my life, I've learned to pay close attention when someone is selling you fear. Fear is necessary to avoid danger, and for the same reason, it is also an effective way to spring people into action. Fear of losing purpose, income, a home, and meaning can all be used to catalyze action. We've been taught that our survival depends on employment, that to live, we must earn the right to live. But that equation only holds true inside a system where money is debt. In a debt based monetary system, almost all money enters the economy as a loan. When a bank creates money, it does so by lending, and every dollar comes with interest. That means two things. First, someone must always be earning money, because debt won't pause. Interest compounds whether you're working or not. If you stop earning, you don't just stop progressing, you fall behind. Second, the system requires continuous income to stay solvent. Even if technology makes production easier, cheaper, and faster, people still need wages. Not because work is necessary, but because debt demands payment. So employment becomes a survival requirement, not a productive necessity. This is why technological progress feels threatening instead of liberating. If machines reduce the need for human labor, incomes fall, but debts remain. The efficiency gains don't free people, they destabilize them. In a debt based system, you don't work because the world needs your labor. You work because the monetary system needs your cash flow. We mistake jobs for value creation, when in reality, they're often just a mechanism for servicing debt. We think we work because society needs it, but in reality, does it have more to do with the fact that debt never stops charging interest? Imagine someone working 40 hours a week making a product. Let's just say making nails to keep it simple. Then, someone invents a machine that can make perfect nails infinitely faster. That person is now unemployed, but the world now has as many nails as it needs. In theory, this machine is providing tremendous value to society by eliminating the need to make nails all day. The same amount of value still is being created while freeing up time. Now carry this logic across to everyone, and you can see how this should be providing tremendous value to everyone. But prior to an open and permissionless protocol like Bitcoin, we had no way for value created by technology to accrue back to all individuals. That is not due to some inherent law of nature. It is only because we didn't have access to a better system. Under our current system, the value created by the nail machine stops flowing to the worker, and their income is taken away. Many understandably think the cost of goods and services come down with this new machine, but in practice, costs often never come down at all. Why? Wages are flexible to the downside as people can lose their jobs, but prices are sticky to the upside, and monetary expansion masks gains in efficiency, so prices remain elevated or even continue to rise. This creates the tension we are all familiar with, where productivity improves, but lived experience worsens. Now imagine instead that this worker denominates their world in Bitcoin. The nail machine replaces their job, but saves humanity an incredible amount of time. This value flows to everyone denominating their world in Bitcoin via lower prices, and the purchasing power of the worker's savings is increasing proportionately. I like to think of it like everyone holding an equity share of the universe. By saving and denominating in Bitcoin, any value created anywhere in the world now has the rails to flow directly back to you. Bitcoin makes savings a form of equity in the universe itself, a claim not on someone else's debt, but on everyone's progress. In this world we are building, work transforms from the price of survival to an act of contribution. When the burden of jobs are lifted, time itself becomes the dividend of progress. We should be getting more time back, not less. And with this time, we are free to learn new skills and pursue our own interests, which in turn will provide greater value to others. Don't underestimate the potential of people that are passionate about what they do. Automation does not eliminate meaning, it erases coercion and gives back our most valuable and universal currency, time. I do want to acknowledge that even in Bitcoin, time is still required to heal all of this misallocation. This is not a failure of Bitcoin, it's the inertia of the physical world. Labor contracts are sticky, housing and infrastructure repricing is slow, and people experience loss of income before price relief feels tangible. Social contracts and psychological anchors don't update block by block like the network does. So I want to leave you with 4 thoughts that I think will help bridge this gap. 1. As Jeff often points out, even modest Bitcoin savings make a difference. In the existing system, eroding savings are a liability. In Bitcoin, savings are a buffer. 2. Work doesn't disappear overnight, but it will likely fractionalize. Instead of all or nothing, there will likely be short-term and project-based work. You may not lose your job, but you may need to plan on coordinating fewer projects. 3. As Bitcoin reprices time, the cost of capital collapses. When savings stop melting, patience becomes viable, and the cost of capital comes down to provide some relief. 4. Energy infrastructure and flexible loads like Bitcoin mining help with likely variables caused by the economic transition by providing flexibility and resilience. In inflationary systems, jobs disappear first and prices never fall, so the hardship is perpetual and indefinite. In Bitcoin, productivity lowers income and prices together, but not instantly. The difference is the pain doesn't compound forever. All of the misallocation will heal with time instead of amplifying it. I don't claim the transition will be seamless, but knowledge is the antidote to fear, and I find Bitcoin literacy really helps. One thing we glossed over, but will have a profound impact, is that most companies are failing when denominated in Bitcoin. They just don't know it yet. Debt-based economies can disguise this fact, but it is just postponing the inevitable correction. Physics won't bend. Once you see, through Bitcoin, that most of the economy is measuring activity, not progress, you understand that a few percent in fiat profits is a failing business that is a net drag on society. This is uncomfortable, but we have to face this reality. At the very least, we have to recognize it. The most pernicious part of this is that on paper, it looks like your profits are productive, but it is an illusion based on an arbitrary measuring stick. As people begin to recognize this, fragile, debt-dependent industries are going to break, as every price expressed in Bitcoin must ultimately justify itself against the opportunity cost of holding Bitcoin. Our cities will change dramatically, and I suspect empty skyscrapers will become a relic of a debt-based monetary past. Jeff describes how many are still stuck in the process of pricing Bitcoin from the existing system, rather than denominating everything directly in Bitcoin. This is somewhat expected when learning a new language, and that process can be difficult and awkward. I grew up going back and forth between the US and Japan, and I eventually became comfortable pricing the world in both currencies, but it didn't happen overnight. Every time I would switch between languages and currencies, I would mentally price the native currency in the one I was more accustomed to. When I entered the US, I would see dollar prices and mentally convert them to yen, because that is what I had a framework for. But as I transacted in dollars, eventually I would stop converting prices into yen and denominate everything in dollars. This cognitive shift can take some time. The more time you spend in one or the other, the easier it becomes. Jeff points out many are still pricing Bitcoin through their native currency by converting Bitcoin into dollars, euros, or yen. This is a necessary first step for most, but the true potential of Bitcoin becomes more tangible when you can bypass the cognitive gymnastics and price the world directly in Bitcoin. Prices everywhere are dropping as they should be when we make progress. Under an honest accounting system, prices fall as technology improves. The more efficient we get, the more everyone benefits. Intuitively, we all know this. Bitcoin is building a future where everyone is born into a world of potential rather than one saddled in debt. The proverb, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day, teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime, feels increasingly relevant. When we get good at solving problems, we don't run out of problems. I suspect we face increasingly meaningful and rewarding problems to solve. It is humanity's difficulty adjustment. The problems that the next generation will face will not be the same ones as ours. They will need to make their own mistakes and adjust. I feel the responsibility not to hand them the fish, but to make sure the tools and resources are available, namely knowledge and energy. The current system lacks foresight by attempting to hand over a pile of fish, like houses, gold, or commercial real estate, that is likely going to be more of a burden than a utility. Meanwhile, the Bitcoin network will equip posterity with honest information, energy infrastructure, and the navigational tools they need to face the unique challenges of their time. For the first time in history, we can build a system where machines free people, not enslave them. The end of jobs isn't the end of purpose. It's the beginning of our potential. Debt is a claim on the future. When no one owns the future can finally belong to those who arrive in it. All the while, Jeff was quick to remind me that the beauty of Bitcoin is that it allows us to pay attention to the present. Time is our greatest asset, and I truly appreciate Jeff sharing some of his with me. Let me know if you have any feedback and where you may agree or disagree. There's a lot more to unpack here, so see you next time.